Welcome to this explainer, where we're jumping straight into what might just be the ultimate heist story of the 20th century. But instead of breaking into a bank, the objective here was breaking out of an absolutely impregnable fortress. We're looking at a story of sheer human ingenuity, defiance, and a plan so wildly audacious, it honestly sounds like pure fiction. Okay, let's dive right into this by asking a seemingly impossible question.
To set the scene, we're looking at O-Flag V4C, which is universally known as Colditz Castle. During the Second World War, this was a high-security Nazi fortress. Now, it wasn't just your standard prisoner of war camp, it was the bad boys' camp. The Germans specifically designed it to hold the most defiant, troublesome Allied officers who had already proven to be massive escape risks at other camps. The walls were incredibly thick, the cliffs were steep, and the guards heavily outnumbered the prisoners. It was, theoretically at least, completely inescapable.
But, of course, the prisoners didn't exactly see it that way. For them, getting locked up didn't mean the war was over. It just meant the battlefield had changed. They viewed escaping as their absolute military duty. So they launched this relentless, psychological, and highly physical war of ingenuity against their captors, basically turning the castle into a full-blown laboratory for escape.
And the sheer variety of their initial tactics was staggering. They tried absolutely everything to get out. Just imagine an Allied officer trying to mail himself out in a Red Cross tea chest, or another having himself literally sewn inside a mattress. They used classic tropes like a bedsheet rope, dressed up in elaborate disguises like a German lady, and even dug a canteen tunnel. It was this intense game of cat and mouse where the stakes were literally life and death.
And importantly, some of these wild attempts actually worked. A brilliant example is Lieutenant Iri Neve. In May of 1942, he achieved what they called the very first home run from Colditz. And this wasn't just a matter of slipping past a distracted guard. Neve battled freezing -17°C temperatures, evaded tracking dogs, and dodged railway police to make it all the way home to Britain. Escapes like his proved to the rest of the prisoners that the impossible was, in fact, absolutely possible. To pull off these increasingly complex operations, the prisoners developed some incredibly sophisticated systems. Take the concept of the ghost prisoner, for example. Normally, if a prisoner escaped, the guards would immediately search the camp and hunt them down. So, brilliant minds like RAF pilot Jack Best became ghosts. They would hide in secret compartments inside the castle walls. The Germans would think they had escaped, sound the alarm, and search the surrounding countryside, while the ghost was actually tucked away safe inside the castle, buying crucial time to supervise long-term tunneling projects.
Section 1. The ultimate plan. Look up, not down. So eventually, the Germans got wise. They were constantly looking down, hunting for tunnels, listening for digging. That's when a prisoner named Tony Rolt had a stroke of absolute genius. It was a complete paradigm shift. If the guards are looking down, we'll stop digging. Start looking up. Specifically, up at the chapel roof.
Rolt had discovered a critical flaw in the castle's defenses. The chapel roof was a massive blind spot, completely obscured from the guards' sightlines. More importantly, it sat right on the edge of the cliff, offering a sheer 60 meters or almost 200-foot drop straight down to the River Molde. Rolt realized this wasn't just a roof, it was the perfect gravity-assisted runway for a homemade airplane.
Section 2. Building the Colditz Cock, the prison attic aviation factory. This brings us right to the climax of this incredible operation, the audacious construction of a two-seater glider right under the noses of the German guards. They actually built a false wall in the lower attic above the chapel to hide a secret workshop, creating a clandestine aviation factory inside a high-security prison.
So, you're probably wondering who on earth builds an airplane in a prison attic. The crew is spearheaded by Bill Goldfinch and Jack Best, our former ghost prisoner. They were aided by 12 highly dedicated assistants they called their apostles. But how did they know what to actually do? Well, they found a 2-volume book called Aircraft Design right there in the prison library. Guided by this book's physics equations and wing diagrams, and protected by a handmade electric alarm system to warn of approaching guards, they got straight to work.
And this is where their sheer resourcefulness really blows you away. They couldn't exactly order aircraft parts off a catalog. What's absolutely fascinating is how they MacGyvered their materials. For the outer skin of the glider, instead of standard aviation fabric, they used hundreds of pieces of blue and white checked prison sleeping bags sewn together. And to seal the pores of the cotton, a process that normally requires specialized aviation dope,
They boiled German ration millet into a thick paste and painted it right over the fabric.
Let's look at the structural components and see how this all comes together. They essentially cannibalized the prison itself to build the frame. The vital wing spars were constructed by literally ripping up their own floorboards. The structural compression ribs were painstakingly crafted from wooden bed slots. And the control wires needed to actually steer the glider? They stripped unused electrical wiring from hidden parts of the castle. Every single piece of this glider was an act of theft and rebellion.
And the tools they used are just as mind-blowing. You obviously can't build a plane without tools, and they started with absolutely none. So they forged a fine saw out of a gramophone spring blade. They created drill bits by painstakingly forging and shaping stolen nails. And to smooth the wood, they made a small plane using the blade of a standard table knife they got by bribing a guard. It's a true testament to immense patience and craftsmanship under the most stressful conditions imaginable.
Make no mistake, what they were building wasn't some flimsy toy or a fragile kite. The completed high-wing monoplane, which they cheekily dubbed the Colditz Cock, weighed a solid 110 kilograms, or about 240 pounds empty. It was a substantial, structurally sound two-seater aircraft built entirely from scavenged scraps.
It was also massive. It boasted a 10-meter or 32-foot wingspan. Just imagine the logistical nightmare of constructing an aircraft that wide in a dusty, hidden attic, completely in secret, quietly taking shape directly above the oblivious German guards pacing the courtyards right below them.
So, the crucial question is, how do you launch a 32-foot airplane off a roof? Well, their launch plan was straight out of an action movie. Step 1, break a massive hole in the chapel wall during an air raid blackout. Step 2, slide the fuselage onto the roof and attach the wings. Step 3, the launch. They rigged a gravity-assisted catapult using a pulley system attached to a metal bathtub filled with heavy concrete. They were going to drop the bathtub down the side of the building, which would yank the glider forward, accelerating it to 50 kilometers per hour right off the edge of the roof. Section 3, the glider's legacy, the flight that never was. Now, it was a flawless, beautiful plan. But here is the massive twist to this whole story. The glider never flew. In the spring of 1945, right as they were preparing for the final launch, Allied artillery could be heard in the distance. The escape officer decided to hold the glider in reserve just in case they needed to fly a message out to save the prisoners from the SS. And then, on April 16, 1945, the American Army officially liberated Colditz.
Literally, the day before liberation, an American war correspondent named Lee Carson went up into that secret attic. She captured the only known photograph of this miraculous machine fully assembled. If it weren't for this one photograph, the Colditz Cock might have completely faded into camp legend as just another tall tale. Sadly, the fate of the actual original glider remains unknown. It was likely lost when the castle fell into the Soviet occupation zone.
However, that is actually not the end of the story. Thanks to Bill Goldfinch having the foresight to save his original engineering drawings, modern aeronautical engineers were able to put this legendary design to the test. Over the next few decades, the myth was rigorously evaluated. In 1993, a 1/3 scale model was successfully flown from the castle. In 2012, a full-sized radio-controlled replica flew safely from the very same roof across the river. And most importantly, in the year 2000, a manned, full-sized replica was built.
During that year 2000 test at RAF Odiham, something truly magical happened. Jack Best and Bill Goldfinch, the original designers, finally got to stand on a runway and watch a full-sized replica of their glider successfully take to the skies, piloted by modern airmen. More than 55 years after they painstakingly carved floorboards with a gramophone spring, they actually saw their masterpiece fly.
So, what you should take away from this incredible story is this final thought. If liberation hadn't arrived, if that concrete bathtub had dropped, would they have made it? Well, history, aeronautical physics, and modern engineering all point to a resounding yes. These defiant prisoners absolutely would have soared to freedom. It leaves us with a profound testament to the human spirit. When faced with an inescapable cage, they didn't just look for a crack in the wall, they built wings. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. It really makes you wonder, what other seemingly impossible feats of ingenuity are currently locked away in classified archives, just waiting to be discovered?